CEO of Local Libations. Meet Ben. Ben started Circle Brewery, which is one of the best and fastest growing breweries in Austin. He's looking to grow into new markets. The problem is, Ben only has two options. He can continue to self-distribute, or he can sign with a distributor. If he signs with a distributor, you have to sign a lifetime contract with that distributor in the state of Texas. He'll move to 30, 60, or 90-day payment terms, and he's currently receiving cash on delivery. And to ship his beer, he'll be charged at least a 30% margin. That means for Ben's premium keg, that's the same size, same weight, and is going to the same location as a keg of Budweiser, could cost 2 to 5 times as much in shipping costs. That just doesn't make sense. And if that's not bad enough, now Ben gets to ride in the same truck as his two biggest competitors, either Budweiser or Miller Coors. And these guys are in the business of taking Ben out of business. These big brands typically represent 80 to 90% of a wholesaler's volume. That means they have a lot of power and a lot of influence. If he decides to continue to self-distribute, he's going to have to hire more drivers, buy more trucks, and lease more storage space. This puts strain on the resources that are vital to Ben's business: his time, his energy, his focus, his capital. Ben has essentially created a distribution company within his brewery, and that was never his intent. And this distribution company is terribly inefficient. He may have a full truck driving from Austin to Houston, but it's empty on the return way home. These are Ben's two options today. In the future, there'll be a third option to fill this void: Local Libations. We're not a wholesaler. In the state of Texas, we'll be operating in our different laws. We'll be operating in our carrier's permit, which allows us to pick up Ben's product at his brewery and drop off at any retail location. Because we're not a wholesaler, we don't have to operate under the same laws and rules that they do. We don't have to buy Ben's product, we don't have to acquire his distribution rights, and we don't have to charge an industry standard of 30% margin. This means we're going to implement a simplified pricing structure that's not based off the value of Ben's keg, but it's based off the distance and the volume that Ben's kegs are traveling. And we're going to be more cost-effective and efficient than self-distribution. We're going to have a full truck returning from Houston to Austin. And we're going to free up time and capital for Ben to focus on what's truly important to him: brewing great beer and experimenting with new flavors, new styles. We've spoken with a lot of wholesalers, a lot of brewers, and they all realize that distributors are a necessary evil, but they try to avoid them at all costs. And many of them have told us it's not a matter of if, but when they switch to distributor, because they realize that self-distribution is not a sustainable business and does not lead to long-term growth. We add great value for brewers, but we also add great value for the brewers' clients. Bars right now are receiving multiple shipments from craft brewers. That means that every time a delivery arrives, a manager has to come off the floor, disrupt their flow of business to take shipment or take order of this shipment. In the future, when we aggregate multiple brewers on one platform, that manager only has to work with one driver to select styles, one website to place orders, and one shipment to receive deliveries. In the future, he'll want to work with one shipping company, and that'll be us. Looking at a per barrel breakdown of costs, we see that we're more cost effective than the wholesaler or self-distribution. Like we've been saying, they have to charge at least a 30% margin, but they're allowed to charge much more than that. Self-distribution is going to cost around 29%, and based off our $55 barrel fee that we've negotiated with Circle, we estimate that this will be around 21% of their margin. And this is going to be negotiated on a brewer-by-brewer basis, based off the distance and the volume of that driver. And we believe that once we become entrenched with a brewery and we gain reputation in the industry, we're going to be able to increase these prices to generate more profitability for us. So a few weeks ago, we came to terms with Circle to begin shipping their beer from Austin to Houston. Circle is a great first company for us. They're small, but they're good, and they're passionate about growing. 2 years ago, they did 1,000 barrels. Last year, they did 2,000 barrels. And this year, they're projecting to do 4,000 barrels with us by adding Houston and Dallas. And they have capacity to do 10,000 to 12,000 barrels in a year. Second step will be to find and working with Circle allows us time to gain experience, to build out our operations, and also to gain trust and reputation with Circle and with the industry. By having Ben as a valuable asset, he's going to be an advocate for us with other brewers, which will help us sign new clients. The second step will be to find a brewer in Houston who's ready to start distributing within Austin, which will complete our logistics cycle. It'll help generate more revenue and improve our profitability, making us more efficient than a self-distributor. Then we'll continue to expand our network throughout the rest of Texas. Texas is the best state for us to begin our business. Over the last few years, they've added very favorable craft beer laws, which has experts projecting that the economic impact from this industry will grow from $600 million to $6 billion by 2020. But despite this amazing growth of doubling the number of brewers over the past couple of years, we're still 45th in terms of number of brewers per capita. To put that into context, a similar sized state in California has almost 400 breweries. That's because they've had these same exact craft beer laws for decades. And they're still growing at a 21% rate in terms of production. And we're going to see the same exact growth rate in Texas. Looking at our test phase with Circle, we're looking at 3 different stages with them and our per week revenue breakdown. So stage 1, we're looking at doing 20 barrels per week with them to Houston. Stage 2, we'll be adding Dallas to the mix while also continuing to grow Houston. And then stage 3 is when we expand and take on their local shipping needs in Austin, while also continuing to expand or continue to grow the other 2 cities. And that will take us to $6,600 in weekly revenue.
So what's important about this model is that we're technically building an infrastructure that's very leverageable, but it starts at the beginning. Just like our craft brewers pay attention to the quality of their beer, we need to be #1 in our niche market by paying attention to the quality of our delivery service. That starts with refrigerated trucks and items like having very high quality certified drivers, among many other things. The most important aspect is the relationship-driven aspect of this business. Having high quality drivers, level 1 Cicerone certification, having them as full-time employees is very important to the extension of our model and the growth of our business going forward and building those relationships from a sales perspective. Because we see those drivers as the face of our business, and we see ourselves as an extension in the face of every brewery that we work with. So paying attention to those key things will help us aggregate clients quickly and have those clients respond favorably to us. What's important is that we build the pricing structure and the fundamentals so that we can scale quickly. This helps us build our moat and create barriers to entry for future people that try to enter this market. By being able to scale quickly, we can aggregate more clients, be more profitable, and drive growth at a rate at which no one can keep pace with, while also maintaining our #1 position in this business. Furthermore, it allows us to have our clients be able to grow with us as we continue to expand into other markets. This creates stickiness with the clients, as well as it creates high switching costs for those clients. So it allows us to maintain recurring revenue and growth revenue as we move forward. Furthermore, it allows us to scale and grow faster and aggregate data about beer consumption, particularly in the craft beer market, where there's a large void right now. Large distributors have the access to this data, large breweries have access to this data, but there's no level of sophistication for local breweries. Creating that option will provide them the opportunity to compete at a similar level and continue to take market share from the large breweries. But this doesn't work unless the economics work on a fundamental basis for this business. So what we wanted to talk about and have you have a look at as investors is look and see where the returns lie and why the cash flows are so favorable for this business. If we start at what we consider a conservative estimate, which is about 20 barrels per week and doing about 20 barrels per day and 20 barrels per month, we think that we can do 20 barrels per week, 20 barrels 20 days in a month, and we'll be doing 20 barrels on each trip at $55 a barrel. That'll get us to about a $22,000 revenue amount, which if you take that into perspective, immediately by fall, we predict Circle Brewery itself will be about 3/4 of this load. So adding one more brewery at a pretty small volume amount makes these cash flow projections very favorable and very foreseeable on a contribution margin basis. Obviously, we have the standard expenses of driving those trucks back and forth and a high expense for our full-time driver, which I've explained earlier is very important to the growth and scalability of this business model. We also have a financing option for our trucks so that we don't have to take the hit on our balance sheet as high as we grow at our business, at least initially, so we can maintain a cash position that allows us to grow, aggregate that scale that we're talking about, and have a payback on these trucks that's favorable for the overall business. So quickly on the truck financing, this will help us to only have to take down about 25% of the truck, creating a position where an investor, or we've also discussed options with small bank loans, small business loans, but even we've created into this model, having an investor come in and take a secured asset position on a $45,000 contribution, allowing them having profit share, which equates to about 5% of our revenues, but also provides them about a 25% IRR over 5 years, including the residual payback at the end of that 5-year term on an agreed upon depreciation rate. But what's most important is that we recognize why that scale is so important. Because we can scale so quickly, we can get to some other markets, which in the green here represents where couriers' permits are allowed and we can actually operate our business. In the red are demarks areas that we think will potentially have carriers' permits or have laws working in process. The two areas that we've circled here are California and the Ohio River Valley. The reason why those are important is because they're densely populated areas around a lot of microbreweries. We already have 400 breweries in these regions respectively, growing in terms of volume and overall volume consumption in the US. These are great potential markets for us because they're not favorable for a self-distributor to take on, and they're also just not important enough for larger distributors, and also larger distributors can't be as price competitive in those markets as we can. Distilled spirits, wine, food, and even non-alcoholic beverages all can add volume to that truck as those trucks are going to bars, restaurants throughout the state. This is all just moving product within the state. And I know that there's companies within the state of Texas that provide, in Kentucky, there's Creations Garden, which is a company that's done very well here, distributing high quality products, making an effort to make sure they're hitting this niche market. We consider ourselves being able to do the same thing for brewers, distillers, and the like. Technology is where the foundation of this business can truly lie. We want to build this from the technology foundation up. We've already spent copious amounts of time looking to field service management software, spending time figuring out the right technology that can make our business model efficient. But like I said before, creating technology platforms that allow transparency for the local breweries to compete at the level and sophistication of larger breweries and larger distributors will only be that much more advantageous to join our platform. So this is why it works out well from an investor's perspective. If I can get back to that one. From a cash flow and a net income perspective, we think given the current environment, there's great opportunity for cash flow, high cash flows and high net income, given the capital structure of the business and the ability to scale using limited CapEx and moving forward, being able to aggregate more trucks onto our balance sheet and leverage those assets to generate cash flow moving forward. And I want to talk a little bit about the financing option. Clearly, we can also grow this business without taking large cash contributions up front. We can start and experiment with trucks and scale at the right pace and speed that the business needs to grow so that we don't outpace our growth, don't take funding to depreciate the value in our business, and we can grow with scale using the financing option on the truck, which makes up over half of the total financing needed to grow this business to the scale we've just talked about. We also think an equity contribution is very important initially with this business. By acquiring the right talent early, because the three of us recognize, we don't have 30 years of logistics experience, but we've built into our staffing model, bringing on experienced people at the very early stage, because like any business, if you don't build it with the right foundation early, you will not grow and sustain that growth going forward. So bringing on the right people will be expensive, it'll make our burn rate higher, but it'll get us to a point where we'll be able to grow sustainably and hit these numbers that we're talking about here, and be a favorable return for the investor. Quickly about our team, currently Alex and I have finance backgrounds, and we have JT, who's also a computer science major from Cornell and an MBA at the University of Texas. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here. Not only are we all three of us also avid beer lovers, we all hail from local business backgrounds. And my family itself ran a company, we don't own it anymore, but for 100 years ran a bakery, original baker in New England, distributing bread to over 5 states. I also have a private equity background working for a company of one of the largest packaging companies in the US. And so I understand, including Pactiv, which was one of the inventors of the perfect cube process, and understanding the importance of low margin shipping and the value add from doing things the right way. So we have people to lean on there, and we're looking for partners that also share the value of supporting local businesses, helping disrupt this market so that we can create opportunities for local businesses and move forward and grow a great company together. So thank you very much, and we'd like to open it up for questions.
You have a little choked up there?
What? No, I was like dry. My mouth is dry.
Phoebe.
Congratulations first on identifying a real niche, and clearly a beverage business that's dominated typically, whether you're in carbonated soft drinks for Pepsi, or whether or not you're in ABM, the SAB, or you're identifying a particular niche. Given that, and given the strength of those distribution contracts, distribution, and the risks that you cite in your business plan. You've got risks of competitors coming in because low barriers to entry, and you also have the risks of these giants who have every incentive to keep you out of this business. What are you going to do to protect yourself from the giants and from the little ones?
So I think I'd like to start with the giants, and we tried to address that point early. We've even spoken with someone that works with a brewery here at the business plan competition, and he was talking about some of the difficulties when you sign on with a distributor, and it's some of the things we identified. Brewers are hesitant to do it. So when we provide them with an option, we inherently provide a barrier to entry because distributors already are capped at that 30% margin. They're already mandated by the larger companies like a Pepsi, like a Budweiser, that are demanding 90% consumption of that truck. So for them to allow space, there's still limited capacity that they can offer. And that's one of the things that we don't have to worry about. We're not controlled or beholden to a specific brewery. So that protection creates an inherent value to our potential customers. I think the second one, which is one of the big things that we talked about, which is the low barriers to entry, and we're trying to address, just like any other business, maintaining that number one position and recognizing it early creates a barrier to entry in itself by providing an option where we can scale and grow to an extent that it would be very difficult for someone to come in, and let alone providing those switching costs and building a moat around us. And recognizing it at the early stage is important. But certainly there's no denying, just like any other business, and similar to Creation Gardens here in Kentucky, I mean, anyone can jump into that business, but once you've established a foothold in that business and making sure that you do that and you are hitting that niche market and being the number one provider in that market creates a value add that is no one can compete with.
So my question is, while you go and try to lock down Texas, and you say 10 trucks by the end of 2016, so 10 trucks over 3 years in one state. But then there'll be other folks like yourselves who are going to lock down California and Ohio River. And by the time you're ready to go there, they would have done exactly what you said you would have done in Texas. So how are you going to be able to compete?
So actually, in the financials, we predict that we'll start entering those markets by 2016 once we've established the model. I think two things really work well for our benefit. One is by establishing such a strong market in Texas, we clearly demonstrate value add and experience. But not only that, there's an alternative to where we can create within this networking effect value add amongst brewers. It's a small knit community. We can provide a service to those brewers that California markets can't, because we can provide them access to Texas. And we're going to be able to do that, and also with the Ohio River Valley. So by establishing a strong foothold in one market while slowly scaling in these other markets, and you brought up the point of scaling to those other markets, we want to do it early, but we want to do it without putting our business or investors at too much risk. And that's why we're taking this option of scaling and slowly growing using the less capital intensive model by financing these trucks and growing to those markets and establishing ourselves with a foothold in each one early.
Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
I want to talk about this clever funding strategy you have for the trucks. And I just want to, the concern I want to address is, how are you going to offer this financing, or how are you going to find this financing $45,000 at a time at the moments that you need it? Where do you go to offer that? How do you offer that? And who do you think the investors are going to be?
So I'm glad you asked that, because we actually hope that the reason we laid out the full financing option is because we want to share that with the right person that can offer the equity portion and have deep enough pockets to participate in at least a portion of those truck financing options down the road. Because unless we know for certain that we already have the other at least 3 or 4 financings in our back pocket before we begin, we put ourselves at tremendous risk. So protecting that early and creating an equity option at a 20%, or if we call it a convert, giving them some sort of discount on the equity to provide them with a guaranteed financing if we hit certain benchmarks going forward. So that could come out in the term sheet negotiation, but certainly we'd like to find the right partner that not only maybe provide us with the financing specifically, at least already or he has other people lined up who might want to take down something that could provide a 25% IRR over the next 5 years.
It's inventive. I'd be interested in seeing how well you do with this. I think investors don't necessarily want to give you the money that way. We'll just have to see.
We've had a couple people approach and are interested, but we also have people that are a bit apprehensive because it's a bit different than a traditional startup funding. But we think given the cash flows and the fact that it's securitized by the asset, it could provide a really nice option for us to help hopefully grow.
So I want to talk about your customer acquisition model. In your business plan, you mentioned that you're going to try and go to both the self-distributing craft brews and go to craft breweries that are also dealing with large distributors, and that you'll peel away people from large distributors? Do you really believe that you're going to be able to do anything other than attract self-distributing craft brewers? And then I have a follow-on question.
No, I don't think we ever mentioned that we would take or try to peel off the customers who are with distributors, because in the state of Texas, once they give away or sell those rights, they're gone for life.
So it's just
self-distributors.
Yeah. Right.
And also, just one last thing, those distribution rights are market by market or county by county. So it is possible that a self-distributing brewer could be with a distributor in Dallas, but not be one with Houston. So we can still get those clients.
So in your plan, I believe you modeled to acquire one customer per quarter. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that assumes a sales lead time of approximately what?
Well,
and what evidence do you have for the lead time to close a sale?
Sure, it's a great question. I actually think that model it's a bit more staggered than that. I think we start stacking up at a similar growth rate that we do in Texas, in the Ohio River Valley, in California at later stage. But we do recognize that the volume is going to be very small at the front end, and I think we mark it out about an 8-month real small volume rate to prove out that client. And that's part of the sales cycle by offering the opportunity to test run with us to at least one city. And we talked about that in our stage growth. So we actually think the sales cycle is longer than just quarter by quarter, but we think quarter by quarter beginning working with a brewery based on our pipeline in Texas right now and who we think we could work with, those fundamentals and where we see the potential of it going, very realistic.
So the business is a pretty high fixed cost business.
Yes.
And if the sales cycle is anything longer than you anticipated, your cash flows are dramatically less than the cash flows you've modeled, and you haven't modeled raising any more equity than your first $205,000, which means if your sales cycle is any longer than you assume it to be, you are going to be up against the wall sometime in the next 12 to 18 months.
So that's correct to a certain extent, except the burn rate that's built in from the beginning stage is very high. We actually have a full-time CEO coming in from a logistics background. We can scale back that burn rate. That burn rate also includes, that cash flow metric that you're talking about, also includes bringing on additional drivers and salespeople full-time according to our staffing model. All of that's scalable and parsable as we grow. So the economics are built and the cash flows are built to work as we aggregate truck growth. So every single dollar that's spent on the cash flow basis is built off of the truck expectations. So you won't burn as much cash going forward, because if we decide that we're not at the customer acquisition, we just don't add the extra truck. But currently, the contribution margins, even having 2 brewers on a truck, bring us to a positive contribution margin of 61%, which allows us to sustain that growth if the customer acquisition or sales cycle takes longer than we predict.
I'm not sure I saw it, and you might have mentioned it. What's the size of the self-distributed market as opposed to the market, I guess, you're kind of locked in, that's already under contract? And also, the ones that are under contract, is there a life to that where you can get in at some point in time in the future?
On the last question, the only way that we may be able to get in the future is if the wholesaler is not living up to their end of the bargain and they decide to sue, and then they can back out of that contract, or if for some reason the distribution or the craft beer laws change in the state of Texas.
So let's assume those aren't going to happen then, so we're really talking about self-distribution. How large is that market in Texas?
So in Texas right now, it's around 200,000 barrels. Well, actually, that's craft beer that we define as craft. But in terms of what we've looked up as actually self-distribution is around 100,000 barrels. And we're growing at anywhere from a 35 to 55% growth rate within this market.
And is that a better strategy to start in Texas than to go to a larger market like California immediately?
We believe Texas is like the best state because we're growing really rapidly. There's a lot of good, first of all, we're really entrenched in the Austin area. We have really good relationship with the bars and with brewers, so that's really one key aspect of it. But we see that there's gonna be a lot of growth potential within Texas versus trying to move to California and Ohio River Valley.
Yeah, I mean, so on that point, Texas has recently passed a lot of very favorable laws that California and the Ohio River Valley have sort of had in place for a little bit longer. So there are a lot of people who have spent a lot of money building out their own infrastructure, on self-distribution, whereas Texas, we can capture early market with self-distributors, prove that model out, and as we prove that model out, go then to California, Ohio River Valley markets, give the option to brewers that either are sick and tired of doing it themselves or that are growing and want the option to expand to other markets. So we think it's a great test market and a great opportunity, particularly because we're well entrenched.
Don't you think that argument works against you, though, because they're already going to have infrastructures and switching costs go up in California as you let that go on?
We definitely agree that the longer it goes on, the worse it is. The switching costs are higher, but eventually switching out of self-distribution is almost an inevitability once you get to a certain size because of the expense for maintaining this self-distribution network. There are very few breweries in the US that have been able to maintain that scale and also continue to self-distribute. So at some point, they're going to have to make the trade-off.
I'm a big fan of your financing strategy, and I think you should use debt as much as you possibly can. I think it just feeds into the cash flow model that you have, so I'm a big fan of that. I'm a little more worried about another possible distribution method that is for all of us. And I'm worried about it in general because it is ubiquitous, and it's highly efficient, and it's very effective. It's called Amazon. And how do you protect against the possibility? I mean, you might have a few laws that need to be changed, but if I were Amazon, I'd be working on that. How do you, what's your value proposition relative to an Amazon distributing for these craft beers, breweries?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I don't think we ever thought about Amazon trying to enter this market. I think the volumes are too low for Amazon. I mean, they're shipping millions or billions of goods around the year. I just don't see them as really wanting to tackle this market.
What's the difference between this and diapers?
I think one of the big... I totally agree. I think the big argument is that a brewer would be pretty offended if you likened their product to a diaper. but in all seriousness, I think just getting to your point, I think what they consider themselves is as artisans. And they want someone that is high touch, a high service, and costs are not, they don't mind spending a little extra to get the service they want, but they are sick and tired of giving that money away to someone that doesn't care about the quality behind their product. And something like an Amazon, for the same reasons that they even get sick and tired of giving 30% of their distribution away to a distributor, is because it's bothersome to know that that person doesn't necessarily care about their specific product. They're just trying to move freight. And for us, by focusing on this very specific niche market, we can aggregate the volume of the type of customers that work well with us. And I totally agree that there will be technology that will continue to make this more efficient. And I think that that's also why we've built this off a backbone of technology and recognizing right up front that we really want to pay close attention to what's happening in the technology space, what's happening in field service management, how we can make this business as efficient to compete with an Amazon. So if they do come in, at least we're a potential acquisition alternative. No. Yeah, I totally agree. Yep.
I agree with Phoebe. It's a creative capital structure if you can do it, but very few angel investors, in my experience, like being a bank. Mm-hmm. When you take equity risks, you generally look for equity returns. Some of my fellow judges have heard that before. Why do you believe that investors in this stage of a business would be willing to accept the anemic returns on the debt side of your capital structure?
Well, considering other debt options out there and the fact that it's securitized, a $45,000 loan is securitized by a $60,000 asset, I don't necessarily think 25% IRR over 5 years is as anemic as what you can get out there today in the market. But are you saying from a debt perspective?
I'm saying most angel investors look for equity returns, and 25% ain't an equity return.
So I think that we're offering the equity option, which is $205,000 on $1 million valuation. So that's 20% of a company with potential equity returns that could be phenomenal given the cash flow perspective.
Just to follow up on that, it strikes me that the investor that gives you equity is not going to be the investor who funds the truck.
I'm going to have to cut you off there.
Oh,
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.